Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Hat Gaming Man here, coverer of various gaming platforms from the not too distant past. This week on Twitter I held a little referendum regarding which system I should produce a piece on next. However, as we all know, all referendums are purely advisory, and it is completely up to me if I so choose to override the democratic will of my people. So, rather than covering the Amiga CD32 quite yet on here, I have decided that we shall look at an even more overlooked platform. That of course being none other than the Commodore CDTV. And why this bloody thing has been reduced to an even lesser footnote in gaming history than that of the Amiga 32CD. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how the Commodore CDTV failed. Yeah. The Commodore CDTV is a rather strange product that saw a commercial release in the year of 1991. In many ways, the Commodore CDTV was intended to be an all-in-one multimedia appliance to cater to all of your consumer needs. So, all in all, this was a very ambitious little product for the dawn of the 90s. This innovative platform was first announced during the Consumer Electronics Show in the summer of 1990, with a release scheduled for delivery before the end of that year, promising over 100 pieces of software upon release. Sadly though, the device would not appear until the following year of 1991, where it would see appearances at both the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, Nevada, and the World of Commodore event in Earls Court, London. In Earls Court, the platform was advertised to retail at £499 for the unit itself, along with a remote control and 2 pieces of software, and in the USA the device would retail at $999 upon release. To give you all a bit more context, as most of you would probably be aware, Commodore themselves were somewhat of a behemoth of a brand throughout the 80s. To this very day, the Commodore 64, released way back in 1982, is still the highest selling single computer model of all time, with there being estimates of up to 17 million units sold of this bad boy. Whilst the Commodore 64 belonged to the Commodore's 8-bit range of computers, 1985 saw the release of the company's Amiga range of family computers that were originally part of a wave of 16-bit and 32-bit systems. The Amiga range would go head-to-head with the likes of the Atari ST and later the Apple Macintosh. To quote Byte magazine from August of 1994, the Amiga was so far ahead of its time that almost nobody, including Commodore's marketing department, could fully articulate what it was all about. Today it's obvious the Amiga was the first multimedia computer, but in those days it was derided as a games machine because few people grasped the importance of advanced graphics, sound and video. The article goes on to state that 9 years on from the 1985 release, modern computer manufacturers were still struggling to make systems that would work quite as well as the Amigas. The Amiga range was very popular in Europe, especially the Amiga 500 in particular, with it being the first low-end, cheap, more affordable model of the Amiga range. It is important to touch upon the A500 when discussing the Commodore CD, as the system could basically function as a Commodore Amiga 500 home computer, with a CD-ROM drive and a remote control. All you needed to do really was pair this media device with a keyboard, mouse and floppy disk drive, and hey presto, you had a fully functional home computer on your hands. Whilst the device could function as a home computer, as stated, the real intention for the device was to function as a futuristic multimedia device, as I stated earlier. For this reason, the outer exterior design and dimensions of the platform varied greatly from most home computers. The platform looks closer to a household stereo system than it does anything else. Many people also compare the look and purpose of the CDTV as being very similar to the Philips CDI, which is a fair comment when you consider the time frame of this platform's release, along with both devices' intended purposes. Outside of functioning as basically an A500, the CDTV featured the ability to play standard audio music as well as the odd new format for the time, CD plus graphics. In terms of what this platform offered, CDXL motion video format was primarily developed for the CDTV, making it one of the earliest consumer systems to allow video playback directly from CD-ROM. The Commodore CDTV fortunately does feature its own library of games, obviously of which were distributed via CD-ROMs. In infomercials, the system was hyped as a 16-bit games machine featuring arcade-quality gaming experiences. Amongst the CDTV's game library, there were around 35 exclusives, and many ports of older games that were available on other Amiga computers. Like with the majority of retro games, many of these are expensive and highly sought after today. Further from the games in terms of software, the platform also offered a number of reference resources that offered a number of functions, such as World of Vista that featured animated maps, geographical images and other information. The platform also offered the Grolier Encyclopedia that bragged the feature of over 9 million words packed onto one CD. Now we are playing with power. The platform was also promoted as a music performance and composition system, and was fully compatible with MIDI-compatible musical instruments. Further to this, you could procure music and video editing software, so if I ever want to change my setup, maybe I could do some of the editing for these videos using a CDTV. Wouldn't that be swell? In terms of video, you could hook up the CDTV to both VCRs and home camcorders and add video titles, graphics and sound effects to your home video recordings. You could also link the CDTV to a printer using the parallel port located on the back and connect a modem via a serial port. So all in all, the CDTV had a lot of upside to it when you break it down. The system seems to be capable of quite a lot of functions, which arguably makes the Philips CDI comparisons rather unfair, especially when you account for it coming out a couple of years earlier as well. So now we know what this thing could bloody do. Where did it all go wrong? Well, as we all know, these multimedia system devices never caught on full stop. Be it the Commodore CDTV, the Philips CDI or even the Pioneer Laser Active. There was never really a demand in the early 90s for these sort of platforms. Further to this, despite the fact that the Amiga range had a large following, the Amiga community on the whole avoided the CDTV altogether, as many thought it would be cheaper and more cost effective to just wait for the release of a CD add-on for their existing Amiga home computers, which would come to fruition with the arrival of the A570. The A570 essentially allowed the A500 to run all CDTV software, so all motivation for Amiga fans to adopt the platform diminished altogether. In regards to this problem, with the CDTV games working on a regular A500, Commodore made sure not to repeat the same mistake a few years later. The Amiga CD32 would feature something called the Akiko chip, which would allow them to create CD32 exclusives that were not compatible with the Amiga 1200 system, which the CD32 was based upon. On from this, the legendary Nolan Bushnell, initially a chief endorser of the CDTV, stated that the high price alone of the platform was enough to make the system a complete commercial failure. To quote Nolan, he states, "It's very difficult to sell significant numbers of anything at more than $500. I felt that I could sell 100,000 of something that cost $800 standing on my head. I thought that it would be a no-brainer, and I can tell you that the number of units that were sold in the US at $800, you could put in your eye and not draw tears." In some ways, the CDTV was hindered on release, as it came built with the Amiga 1.3 operating system, rather than the easier to use Superior 2.0 operating system, which came out roughly the same time anyway. After a couple of years on the market, the CDTV was a huge commercial failure, shifting an abysmally small number of units. In 1994, Computer Gaming World summarised this situation best, which was simply as a total fiasco for the Commodore brand. Amusingly, a CDTV 2 was actually planned and in the pipeline, which was apparently improved and would have been extremely cost reduced. However, this was cancelled in favour of the Amiga CD32 instead, and we all know how that ended up as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the story of the Commodore CDTV, and why, although initially sounding quite impressive, ended up turning into a massive failure. If you enjoyed today's video and would like to see more content like this, then please hit the subscribe button and notification bell for regular weekly videos on obscure gaming history. Leave a comment down below and let me know which systems you would like to hear me cover in the future on here. Finally, my channel Top Hat Gaming Man is funded by the fantastic support I receive from my amazing Patreon benefactors. I will always be here as long as you support me, so shout outs to Carl Johnson, Suzuki Kobayashi, Greg Hooper, Lawrence C, Sid Spaces, Kevin Verhaley, Andrew Bazanski, Edward O'Reilly, Tom Elliott, Mark S. Hines, The Gaming Muso, Quang DX, Sponge Matt B, JD Robbins, Michael Baker, Andy Aldridge, and all of my other patrons. Thank you for improving and changing my life.